The red lights flashed across the command center walls. Captain Veltar pressed his three-fingered hand against the cold metal console and watched the numbers drop on his screen. Shield power at 30%, 28%, 25%. Each second brought them closer to death. "Captain, they're sending more dropships," Officer Krenda said from her station. Her voice shook as she spoke. 50 more ships coming down from orbit. Veltar looked at the tactical display. Red dots filled the screen like drops of blood. Each dot was a Vorthon attack ship carrying 30 soldiers. The math was simple and terrible. The colony had maybe 200 security officers left alive. The Vorthons had thousands of troops. "How long until the shields fail?" Veltar asked. 4 hours, maybe 5 if we shut down all other systems, Chief Engineer Mortek replied. The old Zephyrian's blue skin had turned pale gray with worry. "But then we lose life support in the outer sectors." Veltar closed his eyes. 50,000 people lived in Kepler's Rest. Families, children, workers who came here just to mine crystals and send money home to their relatives on other worlds. None of them deserved this. The Vorthon Empire had arrived 3 weeks ago. Their massive black ships had appeared in the sky like storm clouds. At first, they only demanded the colony surrender its mining rights. The rare crystals found on this world powered faster than light engines. Every spacefaring race needed them. Veltar had tried to negotiate. He explained that Kepler's Rest belonged to the Galactic Federation. The mining operation was legal. The colonists were peaceful civilians who had never hurt anyone. The Vorthons didn't care. Admiral Crexton, their leader, had given the colony 1 day to evacuate. When Veltar asked for more time, the Vorthons destroyed the colony's defense fleet. 12 ships and 300 good officers died in 30 minutes. Now the ground invasion had begun. Vorthon soldiers were mean and cruel. They wore black armor that made them look like metal insects. Their weapons could burn through solid rock. Worst of all, they took prisoners as slaves. Veltar had heard stories from other worlds. He would not let that happen to his people. "Sir, we're getting reports from Sector 7, Communications Officer," Yenta said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The outer defenses have fallen. The mining crews are falling back to the emergency shelters." Veltar nodded. They had planned for this. All the civilians were moving to underground bunkers near the colony center. The bunkers had food, water, and air for 2 weeks. But if the shields fell, the Vorthons would dig them out like insects from a nest. "What about the distress signal?" Veltar asked. "Any response from the Federation?" Yenta shook her head. "Nothing, sir. The jamming is too strong. We can't even tell if our messages are getting through." The captain walked to the window and looked out at his colony. Kepler's Rest had been beautiful once. Clean white buildings surrounded by gardens, wide streets where children played. Now smoke rose from burning structures. Explosions lit up the evening sky. Bodies of both defenders and attackers lay in the streets. His security forces were doing their best. They used mining lasers as weapons. They built barriers from metal plates and cargo containers. Some had even rigged mining charges as bombs. But it wasn't enough. The Vorthons had real military equipment. They had training. They had numbers. "Captain," Krenda called out. "Admiral Crexton is hailing us again." Veltar sighed. The Vorthon commander had been calling every few hours. Always the same message. Surrender now and only half the colonists would become slaves. Keep fighting and everyone would suffer. "Put him through," Veltar said. The main screen flickered to life. Admiral Crexton appeared in all his terrible glory. The Vorthon was twice as tall as a Zephyrian and covered in dark scales. His forearms ended in claws that could cut through metal. 2 sets of yellow eyes glowed with cruel intelligence. "Captain." "Veltar," Crexton said in his deep, rumbling voice, "you continue to waste my time. Your shields grow weaker. Your soldiers die. Why do you make this harder than it needs to be?" "Because these people are under my protection," Veltar replied. "I won't hand them over to become your slaves." Crexton laughed. The sound was like rocks falling down a mountain. "Slaves? Only the healthy ones. The old and sick will simply die. Is that really better than surrender? Yes, Veltar said without hesitation. It is. The Vorthon Admiral's eyes narrowed. Very well. I grow tired of this game. In 1 hour I will begin orbital bombardment of your civilian sectors. Your precious shields cannot stop my heavy guns. Every minute you delay surrender will cost 1,000 lives. The transmission ended. The command center fell silent, except for the beeping of alarms and the distant sound of explosions. Officer Krenda looked at her captain with wide eyes. Sir, what do we do? Veltar stared at the blank screen. He thought of all the families hiding in the underground shelters, children who trusted him to keep them safe, parents who believed he would find a way to save them. He had no miracles left to offer. We keep fighting, he said quietly. We make them pay for every meter of ground. We protect the civilians as long as we can. And we hope that someone, somewhere, heard our call for help. Deep in space, far from Kepler's rest, a human patrol ship continued its journey through the void. In its communications array, a recorded distress signal waited to be discovered. The message was weak and broken, but it carried 3 important words that would change everything. Civilians under attack. 3 days earlier, the USS Defiant moved through space like a sleeping giant. The massive ship was 2 kilometers long and painted dark gray. Its hull was covered in scars from battles fought in distant star systems. Weapon ports lined its sides, like the teeth of some ancient predator. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair on the bridge. He was 45 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. 20 years of military service had taught him that space was full of dangers. Pirates, slavers, empires that thought they could take whatever they wanted. Morrison had spent most of his career fighting such enemies. Captain, we're picking up something on long-range sensors. Communications Officer Pete Collins said from his station. Collins was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes and quick fingers that danced over his controls. What kind of something? Morrison asked. Distress signal, sir. Very weak. It's coming from the Kepler system, about 3 days away at maximum speed. Morrison frowned. The Kepler system was outside normal patrol routes. Few ships went there except for the mining colony on the 4th planet. Can you clean up the signal? Collins worked at his station for several minutes. Static filled the bridge speakers. Then, through the noise, came a voice speaking in the common galactic language. This is Captain Veltar of Kepler's rest colony. We are under attack by Vorthon forces. Our defense fleet is destroyed. 50,000 civilians need immediate evacuation. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need help. They are killing innocent people. The bridge fell silent. Morrison's crew looked at him, waiting for orders. The captain stared at the main screen, thinking hard. 3 days to reach the colony. The message was already old. By the time they arrived, it might be too late. Collins, when was this message sent? Morrison asked. Based on signal degradation, I'd say about 18 hours ago, sir. Commander Lisa Grant, Morrison's second-in-command, stepped up beside his chair. She was a small woman, with dark hair and sharp green eyes. Grant had served with Morrison for 8 years. She could read his thoughts just by looking at his face. Jake, it's a colony full of civilians, she said quietly. We can't just ignore this. I know, Morrison replied. But look at our position. We're alone out here. The nearest Federation fleet is 2 weeks away. If the Vorthons have enough ships to destroy a defense fleet, what can one ship do? Chief Engineer Bobby Torres spoke up from the engineering station. Torres was a big man with thick arms and oil-stained hands. Captain, the Defiant isn't just any ship. We've got the latest weapons and shields. We can take on odds that would crush most vessels. Flight Commander Amy Sullivan nodded from her position near the tactical display. Sullivan led the ship's fighter squadron. She was tall and athletic, with short blonde hair and confidence that filled the room. My pilots are ready for anything, sir. We've trained for rescue missions. Morrison looked around at his crew. These were good people. Veterans who had followed him through the Centauri Wars and a dozen smaller conflicts. They had never turned their backs on those in need. He wouldn't ask them to start now. Torres, can we push the engines harder than normal? Morrison asked. The engineer grinned. How much harder? I want to cut our travel time to 2 days instead of 3. Torres whistled low. That's risky, Captain. We'll be running the fusion. Reactors at 110%. If something goes wrong, we could lose the entire engine room. Can you do it? Yes, sir, but I'll need to shut down all non-essential systems. No hot showers, no recreation decks, no fancy meals in the officers' mess. Morrison smiled grimly. I think we can live without luxuries for a few days. He turned to his navigator. Set course for the Kepler system. Maximum burn. Aye, sir, the navigator replied. His fingers flew over the controls. Course laid in. Engage. The Defiant's engines roared to life. The ship lurched forward as it accelerated to dangerous speeds. Throughout the vessel, crew members felt the vibration in their bones. This was no ordinary patrol cruise. This was a race against time. Commander Grant moved to her tactical station. I'll start reviewing what we know about Vorthan fleet tactics. If we're going up against an invasion force, we need every advantage we can get. Good thinking, Morrison said. Sullivan, get your pilots ready. I want every fighter checked and loaded for combat. We might need to hit multiple targets at once. Already on it, Captain, Sullivan replied. My people are running final diagnostics now. Dr. Dan Rodriguez appeared on the bridge. The medical officer was an older man with gentle hands and worried eyes. Captain, I heard about the rescue mission. How many civilians are we talking about? 50,000, Morrison answered. Rodriguez's face went pale. Sir, our medical facilities can handle maybe 500 serious cases. If the colony is under attack, there could be thousands of wounded. Do what you can, Doc. Convert cargo bays to temporary hospitals if you have to. We'll worry about the details after we save them. The bridge crew worked through the night preparing for battle. Grant studied enemy ship designs and weapon capabilities. Sullivan briefed her pilots on attack patterns. Torres pushed the engines to their limits while monitoring every system for signs of failure. Morrison stood at the main window, watching stars streak past as the ship flew through hyperspace. Somewhere ahead lay a colony under siege. 50,000 people who had no idea help was coming. The captain had fought many battles, but this felt different. This time, innocent lives hung in the balance. Collins, try to send a message to Kepler's. Rest, Morrison ordered. Tell them the cavalry is coming. Sir, at this distance and speed, I'm not sure they'll receive it. Send it anyway. If there's even a small chance they'll hear it, they deserve to know they're not alone. The young officer nodded and began transmitting. The message was simple. Hold on, help is coming. 2 days later, the USS Defiant would drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. What they found there would test every skill they had learned in 20 years of service. The ground shook under Captain Veltar's feet as another explosion rocked the colony. He grabbed the edge of his command console to keep from falling. The lights flickered and went out for 3 seconds before the emergency power kicked in. Shield. Strength at 15%, Engineer Mortek called out. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders all day. We're losing power faster than I can reroute it. Veltar looked at the tactical display. Red markers showed Vorthan forces advancing through every sector of the colony. His security teams had fought bravely, but they were running out of ammunition and places to retreat. The mining lasers they used as weapons were meant for cutting rock, not fighting trained soldiers. Report from Sector 4, Officer Krenda said. Her hands shook as she read the incoming messages. Security Team 7 is pinned down near the water treatment plant. They have wounded and can't move them. Send Team 12 to help with the evacuation, Veltar ordered. He knew it was hopeless. Team 12 was already helping civilians reach the underground shelters. There weren't enough security officers to be everywhere at once. Outside the command center, the sound of weapons fire grew closer. Vorthan plasma rifles made a distinctive crackling sound when they fired. The colony's mining equipment made a deep humming noise. Veltar could tell his people were losing ground just by listening to the battle. In the residential district, families ran through the streets carrying whatever they could grab. Children cried as their parents pulled them toward the emergency shelters. Old people who couldn't move fast enough were helped by their neighbors. Everyone knew the underground bunkers were their only hope of survival. The bunkers had thick metal, walls, and their own air supply. They could protect people from orbital bombardment for a while. But if the Vorthons took control of the surface, they could cut off the air or pump poison gas into the tunnels. It would be a slow, terrible death. Security. Officer Turnak crouched behind an overturned cargo hauler, firing his converted mining laser at advancing Vorthon soldiers. The weapon was heavy and awkward, never designed for combat. Each shot drained the battery pack, and he only had 2 spare packs left. 3 Vorthons in black armor moved toward his position. Their plasma rifles could punch holes through the cargo, hauler's metal walls. Turnak knew he couldn't stop all 3 of them, but he had to try. Behind him, a family with 2 small children was trying to reach the nearest shelter entrance. He fired his laser at the closest Vorthon. The beam hit the soldier's chest armor and left a glowing mark, but didn't penetrate. The Vorthon stumbled but kept coming. Their armor was too good, their weapons too powerful. Turnak's laser ran out of power. He reached for a spare battery, packed just as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. The metal around him began to glow red hot from the enemy fire. He could smell his own fur burning from the heat. "This is it," he whispered to himself. At least he had given the family time to run. But then mining supervisor Kelson appeared with a heavy drilling unit. The machine was designed to bore through solid stone. When Kelson fired it at the Vorthons, the high-pressure beam knocked 2 of them off their feet and sent them flying backward. "Come on," Kelson shouted. "We have to get out of here." Turnak grabbed his remaining equipment and ran with the supervisor toward the shelter entrance. Behind them, more Vorthon soldiers appeared, but the 2 colony defenders made it to safety just as the heavy blast doors closed. In orbit above the planet, Admiral Crexton watched the battle reports on his command ship. The invasion was going well, but not as quickly as he had hoped. The colonists were putting up more resistance than expected. His soldiers had taken heavy casualties trying to advance through the mining equipment and improvised defenses. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "Our ground forces have secured 60% of the colony surface. However, most of the civilians have reached the underground shelters." Crexton's 4 arms gestured impatiently. "How long to break into the shelters?" "Our engineers estimate 12 hours to cut through the blast doors, sir. The colonists built them well." 12 hours? Crexton's yellow eyes glowed with anger. "I don't have 12 hours. The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that Federation reinforcements will arrive." The Admiral stared at the planet below. The colony's shields were almost gone. Soon he could begin orbital bombardment of the surface structures. But that wouldn't reach the people hiding underground. "Prepare the deep strike missiles," Crexton ordered. "Load them with seismic charges. We'll shake those colonists out of their holes." His weapons officer looked nervous. "Sir, those charges will cause massive underground collapses. The civilian casualties will be enormous." "Good," Crexton said coldly. "Dead civilians can't fight back, and live ones make better slaves when they're properly frightened." Back in the colony command center, Captain Veltar received the final reports from his security teams. Half of his officers were dead or wounded. The rest were trapped in small pockets throughout the colony, running low on ammunition and power cells. "Shield strength at 8%, Mortek announced. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Vorthon fleet. They're charging their main guns." Veltar nodded grimly. He had expected this. Once the shields failed, the orbital bombardment would begin. The surface buildings would be destroyed in minutes. But the real horror would come after that, when the Vorthons started digging for the people hiding below. "Send one final message on all emergency frequencies," Veltar ordered. "Tell anyone out there that we fought as long as we could. Tell them the Vorthons show no mercy to civilians, and tell them to remember us." Communications Officer Yenta's fingers trembled as she transmitted the message. It was probably useless. The Vorthon jamming was still too strong, but she had to try. Far away in hyperspace, the USS Defiant raced toward the Kepler system. In the ship's engine room, Chief Torres watched his instruments with growing concern. The fusion reactors were running hotter than ever before. Warning lights flashed red across his control panels. "Come on," Torres whispered to his machines. "Just hold together for 18 more hours. These people need us." The Defiant flew on through the darkness, carrying the hopes of 50,000 innocent souls who had no idea help was coming. The space around Kepler's Rest was quiet except for the low hum of Vorthon warships. 23 black vessels hung in orbit like metal vultures waiting to feed. Admiral Crexton sat in his command chair, watching the final preparations for orbital bombardment. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his weapons officer announced. "Deep strike missiles loaded with seismic charges. We can begin bombardment on your order." Crexton smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Begin firing. I want those underground rats shaken loose." The Vorthon fleet opened fire on the planet below. Bright flashes lit up the colony's surface as buildings exploded. The few remaining shield generators overloaded and died. Nothing stood between the colonists and total destruction. Then space itself seemed to tear open. A massive shape dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was gray and scarred, with weapon ports that looked like angry eyes. The USS Defiant had arrived, and it was not happy. "Admiral!" the Vorthon sensor operator shouted. "Unknown ship detected. It's huge, sir. 2 kilometers long." Crexton leaned forward in his chair. "Identification?" "Human design, sir. Ranger-class heavy cruiser." "How did they get here so fast?" On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Morrison stared at the tactical display. 23 enemy ships against 1. The odds were terrible, but he had faced worse during the war. His crew was ready. His ship was loaded for battle. "Collins, open a channel to all Vorthon vessels," Morrison ordered. "Channel open, sir." Morrison's voice echoed across space, reaching every ship in the Vorthon fleet. "This is Captain Jake Morrison, of the United Earth Navy. You are attacking civilians under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Crexton laughed when he heard the transmission. 1 human ship against his entire fleet? It was suicide. "Human, Captain," he replied. "You are greatly outnumbered. Turn around and leave, or we will add your wreckage to our collection." Morrison's response was simple and direct. "No." "Then you will die," Crexton snarled. "All ships, attack formation, destroy that human vessel." The Vorthon fleet turned toward the Defiant like a pack of wolves. Their black ships accelerated to attack speed, weapons charging. Plasma cannons and missile tubes glowed with deadly energy. But Morrison was ready for them. "Grant, you have tactical control," he said to his second-in-command. "Show them what happens when they threaten innocent people." Commander Grant's fingers danced over her weapons console. All missile tubes loaded. Point defense systems online. Fighter squadrons launching now. The first wave of Vorthon ships opened fire at maximum range. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the Defiant, but the human ship's advanced point defense systems came to life like an angry swarm of metal bees. Laser turrets tracked and destroyed incoming missiles. Energy shields absorbed plasma fire that would have crippled other vessels. The Defiant returned fire with devastating accuracy. Human missiles were faster and smarter than anything the Vorthons had seen. They curved around enemy point defenses and struck with pinpoint precision. The first Vorthon ship exploded in a ball of orange fire. "Impossible!" Crexton shouted. "How did they penetrate our armor?" His tactical officer studied the sensor readings, with growing fear. "Sir, their weapons are using some kind of adaptive technology. The missiles learn from each shot and adjust their attack patterns." Flight Commander Sullivan's voice came over the comm system. "Phoenix Squadron engaging enemy. Fighters. We have them outnumbered 3-1, but our birds are faster and smarter." On the planet below, Captain Veltar watched the space battle through the colony's remaining sensors. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. 1 ship fighting an entire fleet and actually winning. "Who are these humans?" Officer Krenda whispered. "How can they fight so many ships at once?" "I don't know," Veltar replied. "But they came when no one else would. They're risking everything to save us." The battle raged across the star system. The Defiant moved like a dancer, using its speed and agility to avoid the worst enemy fire while striking back with lethal precision. Human fighters swarmed around Vorthan ships like angry insects, their advanced weapons cutting through armor that had seemed invincible. Chief Engineer Torres worked frantically in the engine room, keeping the ship's systems running, at peak efficiency. "Come on, beautiful," he whispered to his machines. "Give me everything you've got." The ship's fusion reactors hummed with power. Energy flowed to weapons, shields, and engines in perfect balance. Every system worked together like parts of a single, deadly organism. Admiral Crexton watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. 7 of his ships were already destroyed or disabled. The human vessel seemed to anticipate every move his captains made. It was like fighting a ghost that could read minds. "Admiral, we should retreat," his tactical officer suggested. "This ship is too advanced, we can't win." "No," Crexton roared. "I will not be defeated by one human ship. All remaining vessels concentrate fire on their engines. If we can't destroy them, we'll trap them here." The surviving Vorthan ships closed in around the Defiant like a tightening noose. Plasma fire came from all directions, overwhelming even the advanced human point defenses. The ship's shields began to weaken under the constant bombardment. "Shields down to 60%, Grant reported. "They're concentrating fire on our engine section." Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. "Torres, can you give me more power?" "Already pushing the reactors past safe limits, Captain. If I give you more, we might lose containment." "Do it anyway. These people are depending on us." The Defiant's engines roared with increased power. The ship accelerated toward the center of the Vorthan formation, weapons blazing. It was a desperate gamble, but Morrison knew that sometimes the best defense was a fierce attack. "Sullivan, bring your fighters home," he ordered. "We're going right through the middle of them." "Copy that, Captain." Phoenix Squadron returning. To base. The human ship plunged into the heart of the enemy fleet like a spear thrown by an angry god. Its weapons fired in all directions, targeting multiple ships at once. The Vorthans tried to follow, but their own ships got in each other's way. In the confusion, 3 more enemy vessels exploded. The survivors began to spread out, trying to avoid hitting their own allies. But this gave the Defiant room to maneuver, and Commander Grant took full advantage. "Target their command ship," Morrison ordered. "End this now." Admiral Crexton saw the human vessel turning toward him and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Real, honest fear of an enemy that refused to give up or run away. "All ships protect the flagship," he shouted. But it was too late. The Defiant's main guns were already locked onto his vessel. The USS Defiant's main guns fired with the force of a small star. Twin beams of pure energy crossed space in less than a second and struck Admiral Crexton's flagship. The Vorthan ship's shields collapsed instantly. Its armor melted like ice, in a furnace. The blast tore through the vessel from bow to stern, and it exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. Admiral Crexton died without knowing what hit him. The remaining Vorthan ships stopped firing. Their crews stared in shock at the empty space where their flagship used to be. The most powerful vessel in their fleet had been destroyed with a single shot. The human ship's weapons were beyond anything they had imagined. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the enemy fleet through the main screen. 15 Vorthan ships remained. They were turning away from the planet, trying to escape. Morrison's expression was cold as winter steel. "Where do you think you're going?" he said quietly. Commander Grant looked up from her tactical station. "Captain, they're retreating. Should we let them go?" Morrison shook his head slowly. "No one threatens civilians and walks away. Not on my watch." He opened communications to the fleeing Vorthan ships. "Attention, Vorthan vessels. You came here to murder innocent people. You destroyed their defense fleet. You bombed their homes. Did you think there would be no consequences?" No response came from the enemy ships. They were too busy running to reply. "Grant, target their engines," Morrison ordered. "I want them disabled, not destroyed. They're going to stand trial for what they did here." "Yes, sir," Grant replied. Her fingers worked the targeting controls with deadly precision. Missile locks acquired. Firing. Smart missiles streaked from the Defiant's launch tubes. Each one was programmed to target specific ship systems. They curved through space like hunting animals, avoiding point defense fire and striking their targets with surgical accuracy. One by one, the fleeing Vorthan ships lost power to their engines. They drifted helplessly in space, unable to escape or fight back. Their crews sent desperate surrender messages begging for mercy. Morrison ignored the pleas. He had seen the damage on the planet below. He knew what these creatures had planned for 50,000 innocent colonists. Mercy was something they should have thought about before they started killing civilians. "Collins, patch me through to the colony," Morrison said. "Channel open, Captain." Kepler's Rest. This is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiant. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're sending medical teams and supplies to the surface. Hold tight, people. Help is on the way. On the planet below, Captain Veltar stared at his communications console in amazement. The human voice was strong and confident, without any trace of doubt or fear. It was the voice of someone who had just fought 23 enemy ships and won. "They did it," Officer Krenda whispered. "One ship against an entire fleet, and they won." "How is that possible?" Engineer Mortek asked. "The Vorthons had superior numbers. They should have been able to overwhelm any single vessel." Veltar thought about the battle he had watched on his sensors. The human ship had moved like a living thing, predicting enemy attacks and striking back with impossible accuracy. Its weapons had cut through Vorthan armor like it was made of paper. Most importantly, its crew had never hesitated, never shown fear, never considered retreat. "They didn't fight like a military unit," Veltar said slowly. "They fought like a family protecting their home. Every shot was personal. Every maneuver was driven by anger at what the Vorthans were doing to us." The first human shuttle landed in the colony's central plaza 2 hours later. The blast doors opened and Captain Morrison stepped out, followed by medical teams carrying supplies and equipment. He was shorter than most humans in the movies, with gray hair and tired eyes. But when he walked, the very air around him seemed to carry authority. Dr. Rodriguez immediately set up triage stations for the wounded. His medical teams worked with calm efficiency, treating both colonist and human injuries. Chief Engineer Torres led repair crews to restore power and communications throughout the colony. Flight Commander Sullivan organized search and rescue operations, using her fighters to locate survivors in damaged buildings. Every human on the surface worked with the focused intensity of people who understood that lives depended on their speed and skill. Captain Veltar met Morrison in the colony's main administrative building. The Zephyrian leader was nervous about meeting the human who had just destroyed an entire fleet, but when Morrison shook his hand, the gesture was gentle and respectful. "Captain Veltar," Morrison said, "I'm sorry we didn't get here sooner." "How? Many casualties?" 327 dead, Veltar replied. "Over 800 wounded. It could have been much worse if you hadn't arrived when you did." Morrison nodded grimly. "The Vorthans will answer for those deaths. I've already sent word to Federation Command. They'll face trial for war crimes." "Captain," Veltar said carefully, "may I ask you something? How did one ship defeat so many enemies?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at his crew working to help the colonists. "We didn't see enemies out there, Captain. We saw bullies hurting innocent people. When humans see that, we don't count odds or calculate risks. We just act." "But your weapons, your tactics, technology helps," Morrison admitted. "But it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is why you're fighting. We weren't fighting for territory or resources or glory. We were fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. That makes all the difference." Over the next week, the USS Defiant remained in orbit while its crew helped rebuild the colony. Human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian technicians to repair damaged systems. Medical teams treated the wounded and provided trauma counseling for survivors. The story of the Battle of Kepler's Rest spread quickly through the galaxy. Other species learned that when humans said they protected civilians, they meant it. Pirates and slavers began avoiding systems where human ships might patrol. Aggressive empires thought twice before attacking peaceful colonies. Captain Veltar stood in his rebuilt command center, watching the stars through the new windows. The USS Defiant was preparing to leave, returning to its patrol duties. The human Ship had become legend among his people, but to Morrison and his crew it was just another day's work. A transmission came in from Captain Morrison. Kepler's Rest. This is the Defiant. We're departing system. Take care of yourselves and don't hesitate to call if you need help. Thank you, Captain Morrison, Veltar replied. We will never forget what you did for us. Just remember this, Morrison said. The galaxy is full of predators who think they can take whatever they want, but it's also full of people willing to stand up to them. You're not alone out here. The USS Defiant turned away from the planet and disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its crew to whatever crisis awaited them next. Behind them, 50,000 grateful colonists went about rebuilding their lives, secure in the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, the wolves of Terra were hunting those who preyed upon the innocent.